Podcasting from WordPress. It's seriously simple. Let me show you how. Let me also talk about the benefits of why podcasting from your own platform that you own, that's located on your own domain, is a better option than podcasting from a corporate-owned platform. But first, let's just look into what it is on the front end, how it works, and then get into how to set it up in the back end of WordPress. We'll talk about the benefits of doing all of this along the way. So let's just get started. First off, I'm going to take my face off of the screen so we can focus on what truly matters. Goodbye, face. Okay, here on the front end of my own WordPress website, we have my own podcast player. This is on one of the pages for Mind Creates Meaning, and this is built into Autonomy Agency, which is the independent business infrastructure for independent content creators. It is WordPress pre-configured with everything that a content creator would want for not only monetizing content, syndicating content, announcing new content to the world through all of the social media platforms that are linked to the WordPress installation. But it just makes things super easy, and it does it without fees. The only fee involved is the fee for credit card processing. I could not find a way around that one, but man, if I could, I would, for both myself and for you. Let's look at the front end. We have an episode here, a single episode, which is episode 1 of a podcast here on the Autonomy and Agency website. We can see that the episode player appears on a post-like page. We have the title. We have the player itself with all of the glorious interactivity for subscribing, sharing, speed, rewinding, fast-forwarding, volume, and the nice branding. Of course, you can allow or disallow users to download the file or play in a new window. The duration for the episode is automatically configured as is the recording date. And then we have, of course, the description of the episode. You can place your show notes, your transcription, or simply a guest introduction here. Because it's WordPress, you can include newsletter signups. You can include whatever you like to augment or support your podcast episode. Let's look at the show page, in which all of the episodes, for which we currently only have one, will appear in columns. And then when you click on an episode, it brings you to the page that we are already familiar with, that we took a look at. Let's look at the back end inside of WordPress. So let's slide over to the administrative section. Here we are. In Autonomy and Agency, the podcast settings are found beneath the Creation tab. If you're working with stock WordPress and seriously simple podcast plugin, which is what we are using, it will simply appear anywhere that the plugin throws the settings into the admin menu. I've customized WordPress to be extraordinarily organized, so I've got all of my creation under one tab for posts, pages, podcasts, media, newsletters, products, and knowledge base entries. And then I've gone on to further categorize monetization, customers, customer tracking, and feedback. But let's stick with the podcast settings for now. Underneath the General tab, which is located beneath the Settings tab, we have podcast post types. We can choose from all of the post types that we have installed on our WordPress website. I have a great many, but the only post type I'm using for podcast purposes are podcasts. So it's the only one that's needed to be checked. Here we have an option. Do we wish for our podcast to be included and to appear within our main blog feed? If we do, we can check this box. It may or may not work with all WordPress themes, but the way I operate is that I have my podcast in a feed that is separate from my main blog feed. Do we wish to enable iTunes fields. We can turn this on to enable the iOS 11 specific fields on each episode. And then we can give our podcast shows a slug. The slug that we choose here, you'll notice that I have chosen shows. If we slide over to the front end once more, if I go to the main podcast page and reveal the URL, we can see that shows is right here. We have the main URL, then we have our slug, then we have the name of our podcast. This can be whatever you like it to be, except for it cannot be the word podcast. That is reserved for other things. Now let's move beyond our general settings and look at the player itself. This tab is for the controls and the visualization of our podcast player. This audio player is controlled from our player tab settings. Media player locations. Do we want them to appear in the excerpt or in the full content? I have mine in the full content. Do we want the player position above a page and post content or below it? Well, if people are listening to a podcast and that's what they're expecting, I believe that you should place that front and center, right at the top. Media player visibility, I've got it available to everyone, not just to logged in users. The subscription URLs, that subscribe URL is what we see here in the player. Media player style, you can have an HTML5 player with album art or a standard compact player. I've chosen the HTML5 with the album art. Player mode, dark or light, that's user's choice. And then options for showing and or hiding various buttons. Subscribe, share, player metadata, hide or show the download link. Do you want to play the audio in a new window? Do you wish to automatically show or hide the duration or recording date? And then, of course, you can create custom player colors if you so desire. Feed details. Let's move right along. This is where you put in your title, your subtitle, the name of your podcast host, and you get to categorize your podcast. You can choose between various options, between arts, business, down to true crime and television and film. I've got mine in society and culture with a subcategory of philosophy. You can also choose a second category. So maybe it's in society and culture, but it's also in arts, adjacent to society and culture. And then you get to choose a second subcategory and dial down one additional level for a tertiary category and a tertiary subcategory. Give your show a description or a summary and choose a cover image for your podcast. Owner information, language, copyright, funding information, and value for value. If you have links to, let's say you're not using Autonomy Agency and you rely on external crowdsourcing funding, well, then you can place your crowdfunding link into this URL box. So right here, for example, it has buymeacoffee.com, and then you can put your specific page URL and then the label that you wish people to see, such as, hey, buy me a coffee or donate to the show. Value for value. This is exciting because Seriously Simple Podcasting plugin for WordPress enables what is known as Podcasting 2.0. Everything we've seen up to this point has been Podcasting 1.0. What is the distinction? Podcasting 1.0 is what we're all familiar with. We go to Spotify, we go to Apple Podcasts, we go to whatever player or syndication feed we use for discovering podcasts, and then we listen to those episodes, and those shows are sponsored and funded via corporate ads or just advertising in general, old school advertising. Value for value is unique to Podcasting 2.0. It allows listeners to support podcasters directly, in addition to the Podcasting 1 traditional advertising. So you could have sponsor ads that give you a good deal of funding per episode or per series, And then you could have listeners supporting you directly, streaming you financial support incrementally, either by donating a set amount that they get to choose themselves as listeners. They can say, well, I want to give this podcaster $1 an episode, $5 an episode, $10 an episode. Or it allows the listener, when they are utilizing a Podcasting 2.0 modern podcasting application on their device, to set a small incremental stream by the minute show of financial support. That means for every minute that a listener is tuned into a podcast and enjoying the content, a small fraction of financial currency is returned to the podcaster. It allows listeners to send boosts. It's like a tip to your podcaster. It utilizes a wallet address for accepting payments from listeners. We'll get into setting this up in its own specialized video here on this channel. But this is where the information is placed for value. Marking a show as explicit or not happens right here. Is the podcast complete or not? Meaning, are you still producing new episodes in this series, or has this season been completed and now you're working on a new season? Well, you can mark that here in this box. More settings, publish date, show type, episodic or serial, episode description. Do you want it to appear in the post content or in the post excerpt? And additional feeds for syndication. So if you wish to give your podcast a new updated URL from the one that is automatically generated, you can redirect this feed to a new URL by ticking this box and then pasting in the new URL. Do you wish for Podping to be notified of new episodes? If so, keep this checked. Do you wish to set the podcast to private so that it's only available to Casto hosting customers? No point in that. Subscribe buttons. You can add buttons for your site visitors so that they can find your podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Once you've set up your show destination URLs for those platforms, you can enter them right here in these fields. Let's move along to the next tab. Security is actually whether or not you want to password protect your podcast and only have specific individuals able to listen. This is an option that you could utilize, but I would recommend if you are utilizing Autonomy Agency as your solution, the workflow I would recommend is to not password protect your podcast, but to place it behind a member page, so that only specific members who are subscribed at a $3 level, a $6 level, whatever you set it up to be, make that membership tier your security. Monetize it using memberships. Far smarter, far more profitable, a better way to go. For publishing, if you are utilizing a syndication feed service like FeedBurner, etc., and you want FeedBurner to announce to the world, hey, a new episode exists, link your FeedBurner URL right here. That way, all of your new updates go out to that service. Hosting, this is an option. Seriously Simple Podcast is created and owned by Castos, which is podcast hosting. They offer podcast hosting as well as statistics and analytics. If you choose to utilize their services as opposed to keeping your podcast episodes on your own server, you can create an account and put in your API token right here into this hosting field. They're very generous. You don't have to make use of this. This is not necessary for any of this functionality to work. But if you choose to go that external route, get discount 20% off. I think it's just tied into the plugin just by entering your information to get the coupon. I don't make use of that. You don't have to either. I'm all about doing things independently. Now, again, if you have an external podcast hosted elsewhere, whether it's on SoundCloud, Simplecast, Libsyn, you can enter your RSS feed here, type in, fill in these informations, grab a podcast from your show. I only have one podcast, so my list is limited to this one podcast. And then I can choose to import all of my information right here and then import it Extensions and integrations are add-ons for sale. You can choose to purchase them if you want, but you don't have to purchase external hosting. It's simply an option for you, as are seriously simple stats. Same for transcripts and individual speakers and so forth. Creating episodes. Let's first look at creating a show. This is under all podcasts. I have a single podcast. You create a new podcast by giving it a name, a slug, and then designating whether this podcast belongs to another podcast, such as the one that I have. Are you saying that your new podcast is a child podcast of an existing one, or does it stand alone? Once you've given it a podcast description and an image, hit add new podcast, and then you've got a show. When you create a new show, it appears on the front end like so, with an archive. So here's the podcast, here's the name, and here is the growing list of episodes as they appear. Feed details. Let's open up feed details and show you what your RSS page looks like. It is auto-generated for you. Here it is. Thinking it forward, here's the RSS page, and here is episode 1. And of course, this would just list all of the episodes as they are published. Let's talk about creating episodes. We can add a new podcast right here with the name. We can put in any kind of WordPress block we desire. At the bottom, we can choose to designate, is this an audio podcast? Is this a video podcast? Choose a file. We can upload a file or choose one that's already been uploaded from our device into our WordPress media library. We can give our episode an image. The duration, file size, and date of recording are automatically generated from the file that you utilize, whether that's MP3, M4A, or MP4. And these fields are automatically filled in the moment you hit publish. So you don't have to worry about that. You can mark your episode as explicit or not. You can block the episode from appearing in iTunes or Google Play podcast libraries if you want. Here, just like a normal WordPress post, you can choose to set a featured image. And of course, give it an excerpt if you want, choose which tags you might wish to apply, and so forth. So creating a new podcast episode is remarkably similar to creating a new WordPress post. You can find all of your episodes, published episodes, under all episodes. We have one, and here it is, along with its title, its description, the author, any associated tags, the podcast it belongs to, the date of publishing, and so on. Distribution options you will find under podcasting and options. Where do we wish all of our episodes to be broadcast to when we hit publish? We have a wide list from Acast and Amazon and Anchor all the way through Patreon, Player FM. Boo, Patreon. Use Autonomy Agency instead. Not just because I'm the developer, but you work hard to create your content. You should keep more of the revenue from what you create. Podcoin, Podfan, Podkicker, Podknife, Podtail, RSS, Spotify, Stitcher, the podcast app, TuneIn, all the way down through iHeartRadio, iTunes, iVoox, and MyTuner Radio. You can check as many as you want or as few as you want. Dealer's choice. That sums up podcasting, both version 1.0 and 2.0 within WordPress. If you want to set all this up, install the plugin, get it working in WordPress, it's not too difficult. If you want to utilize podcasting with the Seriously Simple Podcast plugin inside of WordPress, along with memberships, donations, and all of the other items that are available by default, built in automatically with no extra work, as found within Autonomy and Agency, all of your creation options, your knowledge base and products, newsletters and such, your monetization, memberships, donations, products, your marketing and analytics. If you want to track customers and transactional data for members and subscribers alike and all of your product sales, then Autonomy and Agency has CRM built in. Feedback via article feedback, page feedback, web mentions, which are conversations between individual websites, form responses. If you want to have YouTube integration, both for live streaming and your entire display of your YouTube channel library, you want all of that on your website and you don't want to become a WordPress developer, well, I have an option for you. You can come to mindcreatesmeaning.com and find the Autonomy and Agency purchase tab. This is the near one-click install for Patreon's open source alternative. It's independently developed by this guy for himself, and I like it so much that I thought I'll also make it available to others, because it's a really good option. I like the idea of independent developers and independent content creators both enjoying and sharing amongst themselves independent business infrastructure for content creation. What a great idea. What a novel idea. If you feel the same, hit like and subscribe and follow this channel, this YouTube channel, for more videos on Autonomy and Agency and its capabilities. And if you're on your own podcast journey, if you're on your own content creation journey, and you would like to benefit from the capabilities of Autonomy and Agency, now on version 4.1.0, if you think that the idea of an open source alternative to Patreon is a good idea, if you're enticed by the idea of thriving on your own terms and conditions, I invite you to check out Autonomy and Agency. You can, of course, do it all yourself. Do it, put in the time and the effort, and get your hands dirty in WordPress. Of course you can. But if you're a content creator and you just want to forego the WordPress development cycle and just be a content creator, this is the shortcut for you. You've got options. I like that you have options. I like providing you with an addition to your options. All right, friends. That's it for now. I will see you in the next video. Bye.